The morning light streaming through our bedroom window should have been beautiful, but it only illuminated the emptiness of David's side of the bed as I adjusted my laptop for our scheduled video call. He'd been in Austin for 3 days, attending the Morrison Tech Conference, and I'd been counting the hours until his return flight tonight. 7 years of marriage had never diminished the ache I felt when he traveled for work. "Hey, beautiful." David's voice filled our quiet house as his face appeared on my screen, his familiar smile making my heart flutter the same way it had when we were college sweethearts. He was sitting at what appeared to be a hotel room desk, wearing the navy blue shirt I'd picked out for his presentation. "I miss you already, and I'm not even gone for another hour." "I miss you too," I replied, settling back against our headboard with my coffee. "How did the presentation go this morning?" "Better than expected. Johnson from Morrison Tech said our proposal was exactly what they're looking for." His eyes sparkled with the excitement I'd fallen in love with, the passion he brought to everything he did. "This contract could change everything for us, Em. We could finally start talking about that house in Riverside Heights." I was about to respond when something in the window behind him caught my attention. A reflection, subtle but unmistakable, the pale outline of a hand reaching across his field of view. A woman's hand, slender and graceful, adjusting something near his collar. My breath caught in my throat. "David, who's in your room?" He didn't even flinch, didn't miss a beat. His laugh was warm and natural, the same laugh I'd heard 1,000 times when I asked silly questions. "Oh, that's just Sarah from our marketing team. She's helping me prep for the final client dinner tonight. You know how hopeless I am with these formal events." The hand appeared again, this time more deliberately, smoothing his tie with an intimacy that made my stomach lurch. I watched my husband of 7 years sit there casually, while another woman touched him with the familiarity of ownership. "Sarah," I managed to keep my voice level, though my coffee cup was trembling in my hands. "Sarah Mitchell. She's been incredible this whole week, knows all the clients, has connections everywhere. Real go-getter." He was talking too much, explaining too quickly, though his expression remained perfectly calm. "She's actually the one who helped me land that meeting with Morrison Tech yesterday." I stayed quiet, watching, waiting. "Anyway," he continued, glancing at his watch, "I should probably get ready for tonight. The dinner starts at 7, and you know how these client events can run late. I might not be able to call again before my flight tomorrow." "Of course," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Have a good dinner. I love you, Em. See you tomorrow night." "Love you too." The screen went black, leaving me staring at my own reflection in the laptop display. Pale face, wide eyes, the expression of a woman whose world had just shifted on its axis. I looked like a stranger to myself. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, replaying every second of the call, the woman's hand adjusting his tie, the casual way he'd dismissed it, the over-explanation about Sarah Mitchell from marketing, the woman who was just a co-worker. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone and scrolled through David's Instagram posts from the past 3 days, conference photos, networking shots, pictures of Austin landmarks, all innocent enough, but I found myself studying each image with forensic intensity, looking for clues I'd missed, signs I'd been too trusting to see. In a group photo from yesterday's networking mixer, I spotted her, blonde hair, bright smile, standing just a little too close to my husband. The caption read, "Great team dinner with Morrison Tech. Special thanks to Sarah M. for making all the connections happen. We're teamwork. Austin life. Sarah M. Sarah Mitchell. The go-getter with connections everywhere." I screenshot the image and zoomed in on her face. She was beautiful, not in the obvious way that would have made me immediately suspicious, but in that professional, polished way that suggested competence and sophistication. The kind of woman who could help a man land major contracts. The kind of woman who could adjust a man's tie and make it look like business. But there was something in the way she was looking at David in the photo, something in her expression that spoke of inside jokes and shared secrets, something that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the intimate familiarity I'd witnessed through that hotel room window. I closed the laptop and walked to our living room, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors David had installed last spring. Everything in our house told the story of our life together, the bookshelf filled with novels we'd read to each other, the photo gallery chronicling 7 years of holidays and anniversaries, the comfortable sofa where we'd planned our future just last weekend. But now, looking around our carefully curated life, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been living in a museum of my own naivety. How long had this been going on? How many business trips had included Sarah Mitchell? How many late-night calls had been about more than client dinners and contract negotiations? My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Forgot to mention, dinner might run really late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at the message, noting the timestamp. He'd sent it 30 seconds after our call ended. 30 seconds. Barely enough time to say goodbye to me before making plans with her. I set the phone down and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out exactly who Sarah Mitchell was. I spent the next 4 hours transforming into someone I'd never been before, a detective investigating her own life. My laptop became command central as I spread notebooks, printed photos, and sticky notes across our dining table, creating what looked like a crime scene investigation board from a television drama. LinkedIn was my first stop. Sarah Mitchell, marketing director at Zenith Solutions, David's company. Her profile showed 5 years of experience, an MBA from Northwestern, and a smile that looked even more polished in her professional headshot. According to her work history, she'd joined Zenith Solutions 2 years ago, right around the time David started talking about how much he loved his job. 2 years. Had it been going on that long? Her Facebook page was more personal but carefully curated, photos of charity events, wine tastings with girlfriends, and vacation shots from places like Napa Valley and Miami Beach. No relationship status listed, no photos with anyone who looked like a romantic partner. But there, buried in a gallery from last month's company retreat, was a photo that made my blood run cold. David and Sarah sitting at what appeared to be a hotel bar, both laughing at something off camera. Her hand was resting on his arm. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m., well after any business dinner would have ended. I screenshotted it and added it to my growing evidence file. Instagram revealed more pieces of the puzzle. Sarah's account was public, filled with the kind of lifestyle content that suggested both money and taste, but it was her story highlights that provided the real intelligence. Under a highlight titled Work Travels, I found dozens of photos from business trips over the past year. Chicago, Denver, Seattle, Phoenix, all cities David had visited for conferences. In the Phoenix highlight from 3 months ago, there was a sunset photo taken from what was clearly a high-floor hotel room. The caption read, "Best view in the house. Thanks to my work husband for the room upgrade. Living my best life. Dar work perks." Work husband. The casual intimacy of the term hit me like a physical blow. I cross-referenced the date with David's calendar and found the entry. Phoenix Innovation Summit. Marketing presentation. He'd been gone for 4 days and had called me every night, telling me about networking dinners and client meetings, never mentioning that his work wife was sharing upgraded accommodations and sunset views. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. David's mom, Margaret, calling for our weekly chat. "Emily, sweetheart, how are you holding up with David out of town?" "I'm fine, Margaret. Just keeping busy." I closed the laptop, not wanting her to sense the tremor in my voice. That boy of mine works too hard. All these conferences and business trips. I keep telling him he needs to slow down and focus on what really matters. Speaking of which, when are you two going to give me some grandchildren to spoil? The question that used to make me smile now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. We'd been trying for a baby for 2 years, timing everything carefully, visiting fertility specialists, taking supplements and tracking cycles. David had been so supportive, so loving through all the disappointments and negative tests. Had he been comforting Sarah through our struggles? Had our most intimate challenges become conversation topics during their hotel room encounters? We're still trying, Margaret. These things take time. Of course they do. I just want you to know how much we love you, Emily. You're the daughter I always wanted, and David is so lucky to have you. After she hung up, I sat in the silence of our house and felt the weight of her words. Margaret wasn't just going to lose a daughter-in-law if this ended. She was going to lose the future she'd imagined for her son, the grandchildren she'd dreamed of, the family gatherings she'd planned in her head. But I was already gone, wasn't I? The Emily who'd trusted completely, who'd believed in the fairy tale of our perfect marriage, who'd planned baby nurseries and anniversary celebrations. That woman had died the moment I saw another woman's hand adjusting my husband's tie. I opened my laptop again and dove deeper into Sarah's digital footprint. Her professional blog revealed a woman who was intelligent, ambitious, and successful in her own right. She wrote about marketing strategies, leadership development, and work-life balance, with the kind of insight that suggested real expertise, which made her role in this betrayal even worse. This wasn't some naive young intern who'd been swept off her feet by a charming married man. This was the accomplished professional who'd made a conscious choice to pursue someone else's husband. In her most recent blog post, titled "Finding Balance in a Demanding Career," she'd written, "Sometimes the most rewarding partnerships develop organically, growing from professional respect into something deeper and more meaningful. The key is recognizing when you've found someone who truly sees and appreciates you for who you are." The date of the post was last week, while David and I were celebrating our 7th anniversary with dinner at the restaurant where he'd proposed. I printed the blog post and added it to my evidence file, then picked up my phone and did something I'd never imagined I'd have to do. I searched for private investigators in our city, because if David thought Sarah Mitchell was just a coworker, I was going to find out exactly how wrong he was, and when I had all the evidence I needed, I was going to make sure he understood the true cost of his betrayal. The naive Emily who'd trusted blindly was gone. In her place sat a woman who was going to get answers, no matter what it cost. The photo album spread across my coffee table told the story of what I'd believed was a perfect love affair. 7 years of documented happiness, from our college graduation where we'd thrown our caps in the air together, to last month's anniversary dinner where David had surprised me with earrings that matched the necklace he'd given me for our first Christmas as a married couple. I traced my finger over our wedding photo, him looking impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, me glowing in the vintage lace dress I'd found at a consignment shop after months of searching. We looked so young, so certain that love would be enough to conquer anything life threw at us. We'd met during our senior year at Northwestern, in a statistics class I was taking to fulfill a graduation requirement, and he was taking because he genuinely enjoyed analyzing data patterns. I'd been struggling with the coursework, and he'd offered to tutor me during a particularly stressful study session in the library. "The trick isn't to memorize the formulas," he'd said, sliding his chair closer to mine at the study table. "It's to understand what story the numbers are trying to tell you." I'd looked up from my textbook to find him watching me with the kind of focused attention that made my stomach flutter. "What story are my numbers telling? That you're brilliant, but overthinking everything. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts instead of trying to force the data into patterns that don't exist." 6 months later, when he'd asked me to marry him during a picnic in Grant Park, he'd said something similar. "I don't need statistics to know that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Sometimes you just know." And I had known. From that first conversation in the library to the moment I'd said yes to his proposal, everything about our relationship had felt inevitable, destined, right. We'd moved to Philadelphia together after graduation, found jobs, rented a tiny apartment that we'd slowly transformed into a home filled with inside jokes and shared dreams. The early years had been a constant adventure. We'd been that couple who cooked elaborate dinners together on Sunday nights, who planned surprise weekend trips to nearby cities, who stayed up until 2 a.m. talking about books and movies and the family we'd build someday. David had always been my best friend first, my lover second, and my biggest supporter through everything. When I'd gotten laid off from my marketing job 3 years ago, David had held me while I cried, and then spent the entire weekend helping me update my resume and research new opportunities. When his father had his heart attack 2 years ago, I'd driven with him to Michigan in the middle of the night and held his hand in the hospital waiting room while we prayed for good news. We'd weathered his mother's criticism of our choice to wait before having children, my family's financial crisis that had required us to loan my brother $10,000, and the stress of buying our first house. Through it all, David had been my anchor, the person I turned to when the world felt uncertain. Looking through the photos now, I could see the exact moment when things had started to change. About 2 years ago, right around the time Sarah Mitchell had joined Zenith Solutions, David's smile in our pictures had become slightly different. Still warm, still loving, but somehow more distant, as if part of his attention was elsewhere. Had I noticed it at the time? Had I ignored warning signs because I was too comfortable in our routine to imagine that anything could threaten what we'd built? The business trips had increased around then, too. What had once been occasional conferences had become monthly travel, sometimes twice a month. David had explained it as career advancement, opportunities to build the client base that would eventually lead to partnership at the firm. I'd been supportive, proud of his ambition, happy to hold down the fort at home. "You're the best wife in the world," he'd tell me when he called from hotel rooms in distant cities. "I don't know how you put up with all this traveling." "Because I love you," I'd always respond. "And because I believe in what we're building together." But what had we been building? While I was home planning our future, decorating our house, tracking my ovulation cycle in hopes of giving him the children he said he wanted, had David been building a different kind of future with Sarah Mitchell. I found our text message history from his last trip to Denver just 6 weeks ago. My messages were full of love and support. "Miss you already. Can't wait to hear about the presentation. Thinking of you during the client dinner. You're going to be amazing. Love you to the moon and back. Sweet dreams." His responses had been shorter, less engaged. "Thanks, babe. Long day. Dinner went well. Tired. Love you too." At the time, I'd attributed his brevity to exhaustion and the demands of work travel. Now I wondered if Sarah had been sitting beside him when he'd sent those messages, if my expressions of love had been interruptions in conversations with someone else. The cruelest irony was that our marriage had never looked better from the outside. Just last month, David's colleague Rachel had commented at a dinner party about how lucky we were to have such a strong partnership. "You two are like the poster couple for marriage done right," she'd said, raising her wine glass in a toast. 7 years, and you still look at each other like newlyweds. David had squeezed my hand under the table and smiled at me with what I'd thought was pure adoration. "Emily makes it easy," he'd said. "She's everything I could ever want in a partner." Had Sarah been at that dinner party? Had she watched my husband praise our marriage while planning their next rendezvous? I closed the photo albums and walked to the window where morning light was giving way to afternoon shadows. In 12 hours, David would be home, walking through our front door with his suitcase and his stories about successful presentations and productive networking. But this time, I'd be waiting with questions he wouldn't be able to answer and evidence he wouldn't be able to explain away. The perfect marriage was over. What remained was finding out who my husband really was. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I knew more about Sarah Mitchell than I'd ever wanted to know about my husband's lover. The private investigator I'd contacted, a no-nonsense woman named Detective Angela Ross, who'd left the police force to start her own agency, had worked miracles in just 4 hours. "Your instincts were right," Angela said, spreading photographs across my dining table with the efficiency of someone who'd delivered this kind of devastating news many times before. "The affair has been going on for 18 months, minimum, probably longer. 18 months. A year and a half of lies, deception, and carefully orchestrated betrayal. While I'd been planning anniversary celebrations and researching fertility treatments, David had been living a double life. These photos are from the Chicago conference in March," Angela continued, pointing to images that made my stomach churn. David and Sarah entering a hotel elevator together at 11 p.m. Sarah leaving David's room at 6 a.m. the next morning, wearing the same dress she'd worn to dinner the night before. And these are from the Seattle trip in April. More photos. David and Sarah sharing intimate dinners at restaurants far from the conference hotels, walking through Pike Place Market hand in hand like tourists in love, kissing in the doorway of Sarah's hotel room. "How did you get these so quickly?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah Mitchell isn't as careful as she thinks she is. Her social media presence is extensive, and she has a habit of geotagging her locations. Cross-reference that with your husband's travel schedule, and the pattern becomes obvious. Angela's tone was professional but gentle. "I also ran a background check. There are some things you need to know about her." She handed me a file folder thick with documents. "Sarah Mitchell is married." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "Married for 4 years to Michael Mitchell, a software engineer who works for a tech startup downtown. No children, but they've been trying. She's had 2 miscarriages in the past 18 months. I stared at the wedding photo Angela had printed from social media. Sarah in an elegant white gown, beaming at a tall, dark-haired man who looked at her with obvious adoration. The same kind of look David used to give me. "She's doing to her husband exactly what David is doing to you," Angela said quietly. "They're both betraying their spouses, destroying 2 marriages instead of 1. The information kept coming, each revelation more devastating than the last. Sarah and Michael Mitchell lived in a converted loft in the Arts District, the kind of trendy space featured in home design magazines. They'd bought it 2 years ago, right before Sarah had started her affair with David. Their social media showed a couple who seemed happy, successful, building a life together. "Does he know?" I asked, pointing to Michael's photo. "I don't think so. His social media posts about his wife are recent and loving. He shared a photo of flowers he sent to her office just last week with the caption, 'Because my amazing wife deserves to be celebrated every day.' My heart broke for this stranger, this man who was living in the same bubble of ignorant bliss that had been my world until this morning. He was sending flowers to a wife who was sleeping with my husband. Probably at the same time I was planning romantic dinners for a man who was falling in love with someone else. "There's more," Angela said, hesitating for the first time since she'd arrived. "The fertility treatments you mentioned? Your husband has been discussing them with Sarah. We have evidence of text messages where she's giving him advice about supporting you through the process." The betrayal felt complete now. Absolute. David hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been sharing our most private struggles with his lover, turning our intimacy into dinner conversation with another woman. Had they discussed my hopes and disappointments? Had Sarah offered suggestions about what David should say to comfort me after another negative pregnancy test? "I need you to find out everything you can about Michael Mitchell," I said, making a decision that surprised even me. "Phone number, workplace, schedule, everything." Angela raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning, Emily?" "Justice," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure what form it would take. This man deserves to know what his wife is doing, and my husband deserves to face the consequences of his choices. After Angela left, I sat alone in our house with the evidence of my destroyed marriage spread across every surface. Photos of David and Sarah looking like lovers on vacation. Hotel receipts charged to David's business credit card, the card I helped him pay off every month without question. Text message transcripts that read like love letters between people planning a future together. But it was Sarah's personal blog that provided the final piece of the puzzle. Hidden in her archives, I found a post from 6 months ago titled, "When Love Finds You Unexpectedly." Sometimes the universe brings someone into your life at exactly the moment when you need them most, she'd written. It might not be convenient. It might complicate everything you thought you knew about yourself and your future. But real love, the kind that changes you fundamentally, doesn't ask for permission or wait for perfect timing. The hardest part is knowing that this love could destroy everything you've built, everyone you care about, if you're not careful. But some connections are too powerful to ignore, too transformative to walk away from. Sometimes you have to risk everything for the chance to become who you were meant to be. She'd been writing about David, about their affair, their love, their plans for a future that would require destroying 2 marriages and breaking the hearts of 2 people who'd trusted them completely. I printed the blog post and added it to the growing pile of evidence, then picked up my phone and started composing a text message to a number Angela had provided. "Hi, Michael. You don't know me, but I have information about your wife that I think you need to see. Can we meet tomorrow? This is important." Before I could lose my nerve, I hit send. Within 5 minutes, my phone rang. Michael Mitchell's voice was cautious but concerned when he answered. "Who is this? What information about Sarah?" "My name is Emily Parker," I said, using my maiden name instinctively, "and I think we have a lot to talk about." The coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet Michael Mitchell was neutral territory, a busy Starbucks in the University District where we were unlikely to be noticed by anyone from either of our social circles. I'd arrived 30 minutes early, claimed a corner table, and spent the time rehearsing what I was going to say to this stranger, whose life I was about to destroy. At exactly 2 p.m., a tall man with dark hair and kind eyes walked through the entrance, scanning the room with the nervous energy of someone approaching a conversation they'd been dreading. I recognized him immediately from the photos Angela had shown me. Michael Mitchell, software engineer, devoted husband, and fellow victim of our spouse's betrayal. "Emily?" he asked, approaching my table with hesitant steps. "Thank you for coming," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "I know this is strange, meeting someone you've never heard of who claims to have information about your wife." He sat down carefully, his eyes searching my face for clues about what was coming. "Your message was pretty cryptic. What kind of information are we talking about?" I'd planned this moment for hours, but sitting across from Michael's trusting face, I realized that nothing could prepare you for shattering someone's world. "Michael, I need to ask you something first. Has Sarah been traveling more for work lately? Business conferences, client meetings, that sort of thing?" His expression shifted slightly. "Yeah, actually. Her company has been expanding, sending her to more industry events. Why? Because my husband has been traveling to the same conferences. For the past 18 months, I watched the understanding dawn in his eyes, saw the exact moment when he connected the dots between his wife's increased travel and my ominous phone call. His face went pale, and his hands clenched into fists on the table. "No," he said quietly. "No, that's not. Sarah wouldn't." I opened the folder I'd brought and slid the first photograph across the table. David and Sarah entering the hotel elevator in Chicago, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing at some private joke. Michael stared at the image for a long moment, his breathing shallow and rapid. "When was this taken?" 3 months ago. The Morrison Industries conference in Chicago." I showed him another photo. "This is from Seattle in April, and this is from Austin, yesterday." Each photograph was a nail in the coffin of his marriage, and I watched him absorb the impact of every betrayal. His hands were shaking when he looked up at me. "How long have you known?" "I found out yesterday morning, during a video call with my husband. I saw her adjusting his tie. The memory still made me sick. I've been married to David for 7 years. We've been together for 9. I thought I knew him. Sarah and I have been married for 4 years. We've been trying to have a baby." His voice cracked on the last words. "She had a miscarriage 6 months ago, and I held her while she cried about how maybe we weren't meant to be parents. The whole time she was, I know, I'm sorry. I've been trying to get pregnant for 2 years. All those fertility appointments, all those negative tests. He was probably telling her about them, sharing our most private moments with his lover." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 strangers united by the devastating discovery that the people we'd loved most had been living double lives. "Do you have more evidence?" Michael asked finally. I showed him everything. The hotel receipts, the text message transcripts Angela had somehow obtained, Sarah's blog posts about unexpected love and taking risks for happiness. The timeline that proved their affair had been going on since before his wife's miscarriage, since before my most recent fertility treatments. She wrote this post about love finding you unexpectedly the same week I was in the hospital for a miscarriage, Michael said, reading Sarah's blog with growing anger. I brought her flowers every day, told her we'd keep trying, that everything would be okay, and she was writing about my marriage being inconvenient. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos of his wife with my husband. "I don't know. Confront her, I guess. Ask for the truth, though I suppose we already know what it is." "Michael, I have an idea, but I need to know. Do you want justice or do you want revenge? What's the difference? Justice is making sure they face consequences for what they've done. Revenge is making sure they suffer the way we've suffered." He looked at me with new interest. "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out my phone and showed him David's text from this morning. "My husband comes home tomorrow night. He thinks I know nothing about Sarah, that I believed his story about her being just a co-worker. He's planning to walk into our house and continue living his double life. And I think he should find you there with me when he arrives. Both of us, waiting with all the evidence of what our spouses have been doing. No more lies, no more denial, no way for either of them to minimize or explain away 18 months of betrayal." Michael's eyes lit up with understanding. "You want to confront them together. I want them to see the full cost of their choices. They've been living in a bubble, thinking they could have their affair while keeping their marriages as safety nets. They need to understand that actions have consequences." "Sarah's supposed to come home tomorrow afternoon from a marketing retreat in Nashville," Michael said, using air quotes around the obvious lie. "I could keep her there. Suggest we order takeout and have a quiet night in. Then, when your husband gets home, we show up together with everything we know. Two betrayed spouses with 18 months worth of evidence, and a lot of questions that need answers." Michael smiled for the first time since he'd sat down. "I like it. When and where?" "Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. My house. And Michael, bring copies of everything I just showed you. They're going to try to deny this, minimize it, make excuses. We need to be ready." As we shook hands in the parking lot, I realized I wasn't just planning a confrontation. I was planning the end of the life I'd thought I was living, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. That evening, I found myself in the strange position of coaching a heartbroken stranger through the logistics of confronting his cheating wife. Michael and I had exchanged phone numbers, and we'd been texting throughout the afternoon as we coordinated our plan for tomorrow's ambush. Sarah just texted that her retreat is going well, and she misses me, he wrote at 7 p.m. It's amazing how easy it is to lie when you've had 18 months of practice. David sent me a photo of the Austin skyline an hour ago with the caption, "Thinking of you." I wonder if Sarah was standing right next to him when he took it. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. I was forming the closest bond I'd had with another person in months, and it was with a man whose wife was sleeping with my husband. We were united by betrayal, connected by the shared experience of discovering that our marriages had been elaborate performances, while our spouses lived their real lives with each other. "Can I ask you something personal?" Michael texted around 8 p.m. "After everything we've shared today, I think personal questions are fair game. How did you know to look for evidence? Most people would have just confronted David directly after seeing that woman's hand on the video call." I thought about his question for a long time before responding. The truth was, I'd always been analytical by nature. It's what had drawn David to me in that statistics class all those years ago. But there was more to it than that. I guess I learned not to trust without verification. My parents divorced when I was 12 because my father was having an affair. I watched my mother ignore obvious signs for months because she wanted to believe his explanations. When she finally confronted him without proof, he was able to make her feel crazy, paranoid, like she was imagining things. By the time she hired a private investigator, he'd had time to hide assets and prepare for a divorce that left her with almost nothing. I'm sorry. That must have been traumatic. It taught me that love isn't enough if the other person is willing to lie to your face, and that if you're going to accuse someone of betrayal, you'd better have evidence they can't deny. Smart strategy. I wish I'd learned that lesson before I married Sarah. I was typing a response when my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my heart rate spike with adrenaline. "Hey, beautiful," he said, his voice warm with the artificial intimacy of someone performing affection. "How was your day?" "Quiet," I replied, which was technically true. I'd spent the day quietly destroying the foundation of our marriage. "How was yours? Did the client dinner go well?" "Better than I expected. The Morrison tech people are really excited about our proposal." He paused, and I could hear background noise that sounded like a restaurant or bar. Sarah was incredible tonight. She knows exactly how to talk to these clients, really understands their needs. Sarah sounds like quite an asset to the team. She really is. I don't know how I managed these conferences without her expertise. The casual way he praised his lover while talking to his wife was breathtaking in its cruelty. Anyway, I just wanted to hear your voice before I head back to the hotel. Early flight tomorrow. What time will you be home? Should be there by 7. I was thinking we could order Thai food and catch up on that Netflix series we've been watching. Thai food and Netflix. The same routine we'd fallen into for the past few months. The comfortable domesticity of a couple who'd stopped making an effort. While he'd been planning elaborate romantic dinners with Sarah in distant cities, he was offering me takeout and television shows. Sounds perfect, I lied. I love you. Love you too, Em. See you tomorrow. After hanging up, I immediately called Michael. He's coming home at 7 tomorrow, I said without preamble. We need to be ready. I've been thinking about logistics. Do you want me to be there when he arrives? Or should I show up after you've had a chance to talk to him? I want you there when he walks in. I want him to see immediately that his secret is out, that there's no way to charm or lie his way out of this. What if he tries to deny everything, claims the photos are doctored or taken out of context? Then we show him Sarah's blog posts where she writes about their love affair. We show him the hotel receipts. We make it impossible for him to pretend this is some kind of misunderstanding. Michael was quiet for a moment. Emily, what's your end game here? Do you want to try to save your marriage, or is this about closure? It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding all day. I don't know if a marriage can survive 18 months of systematic betrayal, but I know I can't move forward without understanding how this happened, how someone I trusted completely could lie to my face for so long. And if he begs for forgiveness, promises to end the affair and recommit to your marriage, then I guess we'll see if his actions match his words. But Michael, I need you to know, even if David and I somehow work through this, I'm not going to let Sarah destroy your marriage without consequences. You deserve better than what she's given you. Thank you. That means more than you know. After we finalized our plan for tomorrow, I spent the evening preparing our house for what would either be the end of my marriage or the beginning of its rebirth. I cleaned obsessively, organized the evidence files, and rehearsed what I was going to say when David walked through our front door expecting to find his naive wife waiting with Thai food and a smile. Instead, he was going to find me armed with the truth and flanked by the husband of his lover. The perfect marriage was about to face its final test. The morning of David's return, I woke up feeling like a soldier preparing for battle. The evidence was organized in neat files on my dining room table, backup copies stored in a safety deposit box, and Michael Mitchell's phone number programmed into my phone under the contact name, Allie. We'd spent hours the night before going over every detail of our confrontation strategy. Michael would arrive at my house at 6:30 p.m., giving us 30 minutes to review the evidence and prepare for David's 7 p.m. arrival. We'd decided that I would do most of the talking initially. David would be less likely to immediately bolt if the conversation started with his wife, rather than a strange man in his living room. The key is staying calm, I'd told Michael during our final planning call. They're going to try to make us look like the crazy ones, the paranoid spouses who've misinterpreted innocent work relationships. We can't give them that ammunition. What if David gets violent? Michael had asked. I mean, cornering someone with 18 months of evidence about their secret affair, that could provoke a pretty extreme reaction. David's never been violent. Deceptive, apparently, but not violent. What about Sarah? Sarah gets mean when she's backed into a corner. Sharp tongue, personal attacks, tears when all else fails. She's going to play the victim, the misunderstood woman who fell in love despite her best intentions. At 2 p.m., I received a text from David. Flight delayed. Won't be home until closer to 8. Sorry, babe. Can't wait to see you. I immediately forwarded the message to Michael with a note. New timeline. Plan accordingly. His response came within minutes. Perfect. Gives us more time to prepare. Sarah's been texting me all day about how much she's learned at her retreat and how excited she is to implement new strategies at work. The lies just keep coming. By 6 p.m., I was pacing my living room like a caged animal, checking and rechecking the evidence files, rehearsing my opening statement, and fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with anything I'd eaten. Michael arrived at exactly 6:30, carrying a leather messenger bag that I assumed contained his own evidence files. He looked tired but determined, dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt that suggested he'd taken care with his appearance for this confrontation. How are you holding up? He asked, accepting the coffee I offered him with hands that trembled slightly. Terrified, I admitted. 7 years of marriage is about to either end or be completely redefined, and I have no idea which outcome I'm hoping for. Have you thought about what you'll do if David chooses Sarah? If he admits the affair but says he's leaving you for her? The question hit me like a physical blow. In all my planning and evidence gathering, I'd somehow avoided considering that David might not beg for forgiveness. He might choose his lover over his wife. I guess I'll survive, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. I survived my parents' divorce. I survived job losses and family crises and fertility struggles. I can survive this too. Michael nodded. Sarah might make the same choice. She might decide that 18 months of sneaking around was actually a test of her feelings, and now that everything's out in the open, she wants to be with David permanently. How would you handle that? Honestly, part of me would be relieved. Living with someone who's capable of such systematic deception, I'm not sure our marriage could recover from that anyway. At 7:45, my phone buzzed with another text from David. Just landed. Grabbing an Uber. Home in 20 minutes. Love you. Showtime, I said, showing Michael the message. We positioned ourselves in the living room, me on the sofa with the evidence files within easy reach, Michael in the armchair across from the front door, where David would see him immediately upon entering. The plan was simple. Let David's shock and confusion reveal his guilt before he had time to construct a believable lie. At exactly 8:07 p.m., I heard David's key in the front door lock. I'm home, his voice called out, carrying the false cheer of someone who'd spent the past 3 days with his lover and was now returning to the obligation of his marriage. Sorry about the delay. You know how airlines are these days. His voice trailed off as he entered the living room and saw Michael sitting in our armchair, a stranger in his sanctuary, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal. Emily, David's voice was cautious now, his salesman's smile faltering as he tried to process the scene. Who is this? I stood up slowly, my heart pounding so hard I was sure both men could hear it. David, I'd like you to meet Michael Mitchell, Sarah's husband. The color drained from David's face so completely that for a moment I thought he might faint. His travel bag slipped from his fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a sound like a gunshot. What is this? He stammered, looking between Michael and me like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. Michael stood up and extended his hand in a gesture that was both polite and threatening. Hello, David. I've been looking forward to meeting the man who's been sleeping with my wife for the past 18 months. David didn't take the offered handshake. Instead, he stood frozen in our entryway, his face cycling through expressions of shock, panic, and desperate calculation. I think we all need to sit down, I said, my voice steady, despite the earthquake happening in my chest. We have a lot to discuss. David looked at me with the expression of a man who just realized that his carefully constructed double life was about to collapse around him. Emily, I can explain. Good, I interrupted, because Michael and I have a lot of questions, and we have all night to get answers. David remained frozen in our entryway for what felt like an eternity, his eyes darting between Michael and me as if he were trying to solve an impossible equation. Finally, he moved into the living room with the mechanical steps of someone walking toward their own execution. This is insane, he said, his voice gaining strength as his shock transformed into defensive anger. Emily, what is this? Some kind of intervention? You invite a complete stranger into our house based on what? Paranoid suspicions? Sit down, David, I said quietly, gesturing toward the sofa. And Michael isn't a stranger. He's Sarah's husband. You know Sarah? Your co-worker who's been adjusting your tie in hotel rooms for the past 18 months? David's face went through another color change, but he sat down heavily on our sofa, the same sofa where we'd planned our future just weeks ago. Michael, I continued, why don't you show David some of the photos from your wife's business trips? Michael opened his messenger bag with deliberate calm and began placing photographs on our coffee table like he was dealing cards in a high-stakes poker game. David's face grew paler with each image, him and Sarah kissing in a hotel doorway, walking hand in hand through Pike Place Market, sharing intimate dinners in restaurants far from any conference venue. These are from Seattle in April, Michael said conversationally. Sarah told me she was attending a marketing summit and wouldn't have time to call. Apparently she was busy. Look, this isn't what it looks like, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah and I work closely together. We're friends. Sometimes business relationships can appear. David, I interrupted, opening my own file folder. I have 18 months of hotel receipts charged to your business credit card. I have text messages between you and Sarah discussing your feelings for each other. I have blog posts she's written about finding unexpected love and being willing to risk everything for happiness. I placed Sarah's printed blog post in front of him, the one where she'd written about love that could destroy everything you've built if you weren't careful. She published this the week of our anniversary, I said, While you were giving me earrings and telling me I was the love of your life, your girlfriend was writing online about the transformative power of your affair. David read the blog post, his shoulders sagging with each paragraph. Emily, I never meant for this to happen. Sarah and I, it just developed naturally. We work so well together. We understand each other. You understand each other? Michael's voice was sharp with anger. Do you understand that she cries every month when she gets her period because we've been trying to have a baby? Do you understand that she had a miscarriage 6 months ago and I held her while she sobbed about maybe not being meant for parenthood? Because if you understand her so well, you should know that she's been grieving the loss of our potential children while planning a future with you. The room fell silent, except for the sound of David's labored breathing. He was staring at the photos and documents spread across our coffee table like evidence in a murder trial. How long have you known? He asked me finally. Since yesterday morning, when I saw her hand adjusting your tie during our video call. You've known for less than 24 hours and you've already gathered all this evidence? Contacted her husband? David looked genuinely bewildered. Emily, this is crazy behavior. This is stalking. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. Crazy would have been ignoring what I saw and pretending everything was fine. Stalking would have been following you around without cause. This is called getting the truth. Michael leaned forward in his chair. David, my wife has been lying to me for 18 months. She's been sharing intimate details about our marriage, our fertility struggles, our financial situation with you while pretending to love me at home. What's crazy is that you both thought you could maintain this deception indefinitely. We never meant to hurt anyone, David said weakly. But you did hurt people, I replied. You hurt me every time you lied about where you were going and who you were with. You hurt Michael every time you encouraged his wife to deceive him. You hurt your parents, who've been asking me when we're going to give them grandchildren while you've been playing house with someone else's wife. David buried his face in his hands. What do you want from me? What's the end game here? The truth, I said simply. All of it. How it started. How long it's been going on. What your plans are for the future. No more lies. No more explanations that insult our intelligence. And then what? If I tell you everything, what happens next? I looked at Michael, and he nodded slightly. We'd discussed this moment, prepared for this question. Then you choose, I said. You can choose to end the affair, commit to rebuilding our marriage, and hope that I can learn to trust you again. Or you can choose Sarah, in which case we'll proceed with divorce proceedings, and you can pursue your true love without the burden of maintaining a lie. But, Michael added, you should know that Sarah is going to have to make the same choice. Tomorrow morning, I'm confronting her with all of this evidence. Her comfortable double life is ending too. David's head snapped up. You're going to ambush Sarah the way you ambushed me? We're going to give her the same opportunity we're giving you, Michael corrected. The chance to tell the truth and make a real choice about what she wants her life to look like. David stared at both of us with something approaching respect. You two have really thought this through. We had good teachers, I said. 18 months of watching our spouses plan and execute a systematic deception taught us a lot about strategy. David nodded slowly, and for the first time since he'd walked into the house, he looked directly into my eyes. Okay, he said. You want the truth? I'll tell you everything. What followed was the most painful conversation of my life. For 3 hours, David laid bare the anatomy of his betrayal with the methodical precision of someone performing surgery on his own marriage. Michael and I sat in stunned silence as my husband, the man I'd trusted with my deepest fears and biggest dreams, revealed the depth of his deception. It started at the Morrison Industries conference in Denver 20 months ago, David began, his voice hollow with exhaustion. Sarah was new to the team, brilliant, ambitious. We ended up having drinks after the first day of presentations, talking about career goals and industry trends. When did it become romantic? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. That first night, actually. We were in the hotel bar until 2 a.m., and there was this connection, intellectual at first. But by the end of the conversation, we both knew something had shifted. Michael's hands were clenched into fists. So, you've been lying to both of us for nearly 2 years? The physical affair didn't start until 6 months later, in Chicago. But the emotional connection, yes, that was immediate. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What about us, David? What about our marriage, our plans to have children, all the conversations we were having about our future while you were falling in love with someone else? David looked at me with genuine anguish. Emily, I never stopped loving you. That's what made this so complicated. You're an amazing wife, an incredible partner. You deserve someone who can give you their whole heart. But you couldn't give me your whole heart because half of it belonged to Sarah. Yes, the simple honesty of his admission was somehow worse than all the lies that had preceded it. He wasn't even trying to minimize or excuse what he'd done. He was just acknowledging that he'd chosen to love someone else while staying married to me. What were your long-term plans? Michael asked. Were you going to leave your spouses and be together openly? We talked about it. Sarah wanted to wait until she got the promotion to senior marketing director. She was afraid that leaving her marriage for a co-worker would damage her professional reputation. And David looked at me with something approaching shame. I was afraid of hurting you, Emily. You've been through so much with the fertility struggles, and I knew that losing our marriage would devastate you. So you decided to keep me as your safety net while pursuing your real relationship with Sarah? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? My voice was rising despite my attempts to stay calm. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you wanted to have your cake and eat it too. A stable home life with the wife who took care of everything while you explored passionate romance with your exciting co-worker. David didn't argue, which was its own form of confirmation. Did you discuss me? I asked. Did you and Sarah talk about my fertility treatments, my hopes for children, the intimate details of our marriage? Sometimes. Sarah was supportive. She understood how difficult the situation was for both of us. Michael made a sound of disgust. Supportive? She was supportive of your wife's fertility struggles while sleeping with you? Do you realize how sick that is? And what about Michael? I continued. Did Sarah share details about her marriage, her miscarriage, her husband's efforts to comfort her through their loss? David's silence was answer enough. So you both turned your marriages into entertainment for each other, Michael said, his voice deadly quiet. Our most private moments, our vulnerabilities, our attempts to build families, all of it became conversation topics for your affair. It wasn't like that, David said again, but the protest sounded hollow even to him. Then tell us what it was like, I demanded. Make us understand how two people who claim to have consciences could systematically betray their spouses while discussing those betrayals in detail. David was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence scattered across our coffee table. We told ourselves we were protecting you both, that as long as we were discreet, as long as we didn't let our feelings interfere with our marriages, no one would get hurt. But your feelings did interfere with our marriages, I said. You became distant, distracted, emotionally unavailable. You started treating our relationship like an obligation while giving your passion and attention to someone else. And Sarah did the same thing to me, Michael added. The past 18 months she's been going through the motions at home while living her real life with you. David nodded miserably. I know. We know. We've talked about how unfair it was to both of you, but we couldn't figure out how to stop without destroying 4 lives instead of just admitting that we'd already destroyed them. So what happens now? I asked. Now that everything is out in the open, what do you want? David looked at me with eyes full of pain and something that might have been love. I want to choose you, Emily. I want to end things with Sarah and try to rebuild what we had. But I don't know if that's possible after everything I've done. And if it's not possible, if I can't forgive 18 months of systematic deception, then I'll have to live with the consequences of my choices. Michael stood up abruptly. I need some air. He gestured helplessly at the room. The evidence. The wreckage of 4 lives spread out on our furniture. I need to call Sarah. She needs to know that her secret is out too. Wait, I said, reaching for his arm. Let's call her together. On speakerphone. I want David to hear her reaction when she realizes their affair has been exposed. Michael looked at David, who nodded reluctantly. She deserves to know what she's walking into tomorrow. As Michael dialed his wife's number, I felt the weight of the moment settling around us. In the next few minutes, Sarah Mitchell would learn that her carefully constructed double life had collapsed, that her husband knew everything, and that she would have to make the same choice we were offering David. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Hi, honey. Sarah's voice filled our living room, bright and false. How was your day? My day was enlightening, Michael said into the phone, his voice carefully controlled. I learned some interesting things about your business retreat in Nashville. There was a pause on Sarah's end, and I could almost hear her mental calculations as she tried to figure out what her husband might have discovered. Oh? What kind of things? She asked, her tone shifting from cheerful to cautious. Well, for starters, I learned that there is no marketing retreat in Nashville this week. I called your company to send you flowers, and they told me you took personal vacation days. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. Michael, I can explain. Good, because I have a lot of questions, starting with why you've been lying to me about business trips for the past 18 months. What are you talking about? Michael looked at David, who was staring at the phone with an expression of growing dread. Sarah, I'm sitting in David Parker's living room right now, looking at photographs of you and him together in Chicago, Seattle, Denver, and Austin. I'm looking at hotel receipts, text messages, and blog posts where you write about finding unexpected love. Oh, God. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Michael, please, let me come home. We need to talk in person. We're talking now, and David is here listening to every word. David's there? With you? The panic in her voice was audible. What is this? What's happening? I leaned toward the phone. Hello, Sarah. This is Emily Parker, David's wife. We've never met, but I feel like I know you intimately after seeing photos of you adjusting my husband's tie in his hotel room yesterday. The sound Sarah made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Emily, I never meant for you to get hurt. David and I have been having an affair for 18 months while lying to your spouses. I finished. Yes, we know. We've spent the day comparing evidence and timelines. It's quite impressive, actually. The level of coordination required to maintain such systematic deception. Please, Sarah said, her voice breaking. This is all wrong. You don't understand what David and I have. A relationship built on betraying the people who trust you most, Michael interrupted. Because that's what it looks like from here. David finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah, they know everything. The hotels, the conferences, all of it. Emily found out yesterday, and she contacted Michael. You told her husband about us. Sarah's voice rose with anger. David, how could you? I didn't tell him anything. Emily figured it out on her own and decided that Michael deserved to know his wife was cheating on him. We're not cheating, Sarah said desperately. We're in love, real love, the kind that changes your entire life. This isn't some sordid affair. You're married to other people, I said flatly. Having secret romantic relationships with each other while lying to your spouses is the definition of cheating, regardless of how you justify it to yourselves. Michael's voice was ice cold when he spoke. Sarah, you had a miscarriage 6 months ago. I held you while you cried about maybe not being meant for parenthood. Was David comforting you about losing our potential baby? The silence was damning. Answer the question, Sarah, David said quietly. Did you discuss Michael's and my attempts to support you through the miscarriage? David, please don't do this. Answer the question. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I told you about it, but not in a cruel way. There is no non-cruel way to discuss your husband's grief about losing a child with the man you're cheating on him with, Michael said, his voice shaking with rage. I looked at David, who had tears streaming down his face. Is that when you knew it had gone too far? When your lover was sharing details about her husband's emotional pain over their miscarriage? I should have ended it then, David said. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop. You stop by stopping, I said. You make a choice to prioritize your marriage over your affair. You choose honesty over deception. You choose your spouse over your lover. Emily's right, Michael said into the phone. Sarah, you had multiple opportunities to end this and recommit to our marriage. Instead, you chose to deepen the affair while pretending to grieve our lost pregnancy with me. I was grieving, Sarah protested. Just because I love David doesn't mean I didn't want our baby, but it means you were planning a future that didn't include me, Michael said. While I was researching fertility specialists and talking about trying again, you were writing blog posts about being willing to destroy everything for love. I pulled out the final piece of evidence I'd been saving, a printed email exchange between David and Sarah from just last week. Sarah, I said, reading from the printout, in your email to David from 3 days ago, you wrote, I can't keep pretending much longer. Michael's talking about couples therapy to help us through the miscarriage grief, and I feel like I'm living a lie. When can we tell them the truth about us? The silence on the phone was complete. David, I continued, reading his response. You wrote back, soon, I promise. I'm waiting for the Morrison contract to be finalized, and then we'll figure out the cleanest way to handle the divorces. I love you too much to keep living this double life. You were planning to divorce us, Michael said, his voice hollow with betrayal. Both of you, together, after you'd milked your marriages for maximum financial and emotional benefit. It wasn't like that, Sarah said, but she was crying now. Then what was it like? I asked. Because it sounds like you and David were using Michael and me as placeholders while you figured out the logistics of being together permanently. David looked at me with something approaching shame. Emily, don't, I said, holding up my hand. Don't apologize, don't explain, don't try to minimize what you've both done. Just answer one question. Do you choose her, or do you choose me? The room went silent except for Sarah's crying through the phone speaker. David, she said through her tears, what's happening? What are you going to tell them? David looked at me, then at Michael, then at the evidence of his betrayal scattered across our coffee table. When he spoke, his voice was clear and final. Sarah, I choose Emily. I choose my marriage. I choose to try to rebuild what I destroyed instead of running away to build something new with you. The sound Sarah made was pure anguish. David, no. You can't mean that. After everything we've shared, everything we've planned. I mean it, he said, though tears were streaming down his face. I love you, Sarah. But I made a commitment to Emily 7 years ago, and I want to honor that commitment if she'll let me. Michael ended the call without another word. The three of us sat in the aftermath of our confrontation, surrounded by the debris of broken trust and shattered illusions. But for the first time in 24 hours, I felt like I could breathe. Justice had been served. The truth had been revealed. And now somehow, we all had to figure out how to rebuild our lives from the wreckage of our marriages. David looked at me with hope and desperation warring in his eyes. Emily, what happens now? I looked at this man I'd loved for 9 years, this stranger who'd deceived me for 18 months, this husband who'd just chosen me over his lover. Now, I said, we find out if love is really enough to survive betrayal. But David, if we're going to try this, there are no more secrets, no more lies, no more Sarah. If I catch you in even the smallest deception, we're done forever. I understand. And Emily, thank you for fighting for us instead of just giving up. Michael gathered his evidence files and stood to leave. I should go home and figure out what I'm going to tell Sarah when she gets there. I walked him to the door, this stranger who'd become my ally in the space of a single day. Thank you, I said. I couldn't have done this alone. And thank you for having the courage to contact me. Sarah might have kept lying for years if you hadn't forced the truth into the open. As Michael drove away, I returned to the living room where David was still sitting on our sofa, staring at the evidence of his betrayal. So, I said, settling beside him in the space where we'd planned our future just days ago. Where do we go from here? Couples therapy, he said immediately. Full financial transparency. I'll change jobs if necessary to avoid any contact with Sarah, whatever it takes to earn back your trust. I nodded. And David? If we're going to do this, I need you to understand something. The woman you fell in love with, the trusting, naive Emily, who never questioned your business trips or late-night phone calls, she's gone. You killed her when you chose to betray her for 18 months. I know. The woman sitting next to you now is someone who will verify your stories, check your receipts, and demand complete transparency about every aspect of your life. If that's not the wife you want, now is the time to say so. David looked at me with something that might have been respect. Emily, the woman who exposed my affair, gathered 18 months of evidence, and orchestrated this confrontation with strategic precision. She's extraordinary. I'd be honored to try to earn her trust. I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. Then let's see if we can build something real from the ashes of what we thought we had. Outside, Sarah Mitchell was driving home to face the consequences of her choices. While inside our house, my husband and I began the long, difficult process of deciding whether our marriage was worth saving. But for the first time since I'd seen another woman's hand adjusting his tie, I felt like we might actually have a chance.